When I did become a believer, and I was just a little baby Christian, and God told me I'd be an encouragement to the Gentiles, and I started telling people, well, I'm Jewish, but I believe in Jesus, and people just gushed on me, oh, that's so wonderful, and I'm like, oh, this is easy. I just tell people I'm, Christian. I can encourage him, Well, then, I don't know if you all remember, there was a little Messianic Shabbat service that took place at the WMSL building. Did y'all ever go to that with Les and Carolyn Banks? I think I met them at Phyllis's house. Anyway, so I did meet Murray Tillis there, and he was the only other person I knew who was a Jew for Jesus. But I went to this service, and I was like, why do these white people want to sing in Hebrew? I don't get it. So eventually I went to a Jews for Jesus convention, and I found out why Baptists love to go do Messianic praise and worship, because they can clap and dance, and they don't have to sing like this. So I thought, well, this is great. I'm an encouragement to Gentiles, So, but, when I became a believer, I went to church. And just like all of us, I came out of church in that respect. I'm going to tell you more about my story in a little bit. But eventually I met some people, a man who was actually raised as a Messianic believer, and he began to encourage me. And so we started doing Shabbat and doing the feasts, and so I sort of have come along the same way that you have. I do want to encourage you today about just what God does and what God does in history. And I'm going to tell you two different stories. These are both true stories. In about 1999 or 2000, there was a young man who came to UGA, and he was doing a Messianic Bible study. And he invited this professor from, I think he was from Chicago, Boaz Johnson. And Boaz was born in India. And Boaz's father had become a Christian and changed his name because he thought he needed a Western name to go with his Western religion. And but Boaz was not a believer. He was going to Guru University. He was going to be a guru. And somebody gave him a Bible, and he read it, and he became a believer. And his wife also was not a Christian, but she went to Christian private school because the private schools in India are better than the public schools. So somebody gave her a Bible, and she became a believer, and they started going to church. Well, she became interested in her genealogy and was researching her maiden name. And she found her maiden name on a list of Indian Jews who had gone to India from Iraq in the 13th century. And so they started investigating the Hebrew roots of their faith, and they joined a Messianic congregation. Well, Boaz was traveling in India, and by now y'all have heard of these people. But he found this tribe on the eastern coast of India. Now, all the other migrations that had come from Iraq in the 9th and 13th and 15th century, they're all documented, and those people settled on the west coast of India. But this is the east coast of India. These people are the only monotheists in their region. And Boaz was telling us that he had gone to this festival in their town in the springtime. Okay, it's a spring festival. The people are eating little flat cakes made out of beaten rice. And they're marching into the center of town, and they've got this big, box in the middle of town, and they're marching around this box saying, we are alive, we are alive, we are the sons of Manmasi. We came to the water opened up, there was a pillar of cloud before us, there was a pillar of fire behind us. We walked through on dry land, we are alive, we are alive. I'm like, oh my God, these people walked out of the Exodus. They kept walking until they got to Burma, and they're still there. Well, if y'all have seen that, their history actually has been documented in a video called The Quest for the Lost Tribes, I think is the name of it. It's an arts and entertainment. You can get it and look at it. And they actually did not walk out of Egypt to Burma. But they've been in the news lately. You see these group of people, I think about 7,000 or 8,000 of them have made Aliyah. They've been accepted. And what happens in other parts of the world when the rabbis find groups of people like this with pieces of Hebraic heritage and culture, because they have no written books at all they have is oral tradition. When the rabbis find these people, they run right in, they convert them to Judaism. So they're all Orthodox Jews. But they're accepting them now in Israel as the lost tribe of Manasseh. So, which is all to say, when God does something, he does it forever. And what he did in the Jewish people is still standing. I want to tell you another story, which I read in a book called The Mezuzah in the Madonna's Foot. And this woman who wrote the book found out as an adult about the Sephardic heritage that she came from. And she began to research the crypto-Jews, the hidden Jews, the Jews that were forcibly converted during the Inquisition in Spain. And so what they would do is they would hide their practices. So they had the Madonna, but in the Madonna's foot was the mezuzah, right, when we go in. So this, he's an American guy who was a Jew, and he was a doctor in World War II, and he worked with a Spanish doctor. And the war was over. The man went home to America, but they corresponded. Then they all retired, and he said, you know what, I would like to come visit you in Spain. The doctor said, what do they say? Bienvenidos, right? Just come, be my guest. So they got together after all this time, and the American man said to the Spanish man, he said, I never said this to you, but, your last name is Jewish. And the Spanish doctor said, I'm going to show you something I've never shown anybody before. And he takes him down the hall to a closet with a lock on the door. And he said, I'm a good Catholic. I go to Mass, I say the prayers, whatever there is to say. He says, but sometimes that's not enough. And he opens the lock on the door, and inside is a 500-year-old talit and a 500-year-old pair of tefillin. And this man begins praying in a language that he doesn't know. 500 years. What God does stands forever. And this is the strong hand of God in the Jewish people. I was raised in a New York community that was mostly Italian and Irish immigrants. Almost everybody was Catholic. My grandparents were immigrants to this country from Poland. They came between the two world wars. There were other Jews in the community. We had several different synagogues. My mother's parents were Orthodox. They kept Shabbat, they kept kosher, all the feasts. My father has one brother, and they were both bar mitzvahed, but they didn't keep anything in the home. And the first time, I think my grandmother was really mean, my father's mother. She wasn't mean to me. She brought me chocolate. But just hearing, what my mother said about the home. The first time that my father brought my mother to his parents' house for dinner, my grandmother made pork chops. And she knew. She knew well enough to know that she oughtn't to have done that. So, and actually, her father, my grandmother's father, on that side, was an atheist. And we don't think about Jewish atheists in the 1800s, but it was very popular. Socially, it was very popular. So in our house, I have two brothers, and we went to Hebrew school after school twice a week, and we learned to read Hebrew, and we did all the rituals, and you have to go to services for a certain number of years before you can do your bar mitzvah. So I was bat mitzvahed, and I'm going to Hebrew school. We didn't have a Hebrew high school in my synagogue, but I got in a bus, got in trouble on the bus, went 40 minutes, and I continued studying Hebrew after school twice a week. In our house, we had Passover. We have a saying in Hebrew, stomach Jews. You know what a stomach Jew is? You eat. You eat whatever it's appropriate to eat. God doesn't matter, the festival doesn't matter, just that you eat the right things, on the holiday. So we had Passover, we had Hanukkah, we went to synagogue for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but otherwise our life was like the lives of our neighbors. In fact, I think I was about 6 before I realized that not everybody was Jewish, because we weren't that different. But there was something that God did in my life. And I believe that this is something that's in the culture. There's a whole group of people. They're called Boo Jews. They're Buddhist Jews, right? Because Jews are very liberal, and God put in us a loving human heart for people. And when we see, like, Buddhism is appealing to us. So you can be a Buddhist Jew. Well, not in God's eyes, but in man's eyes. So, but those people know that they're Jewish, right? And in fact, we never forget. And Jack was just telling us about his mama, right? She's 90 years old. And she just told them this year she's a full-blooded Jew. Because it was in Germany. Don't tell anybody. But even if you don't tell anybody, you don't forget. It's just part of who you are. And I believe what God does through that is that he gives you the desire to find him. And I mean, I can remember I was 4 years old and I was thinking, well, who is God? To know who God was. So the only thing that I ever really learned about Jesus, I learned in the 4th grade. And that was that the Jews had killed Jesus. And that's what I knew. And, like I wouldn't step on a dead caterpillar. I mean, I wouldn't think about anything. So this is a very strange concept for a 10-year-old. I'm responsible for the death of some man. I don't know who he is. And I didn't want to kill anybody anyway. But this is how I grew up. I was in high school. I joined a youth organization in my synagogue. And in 1968, I went to Israel. Now, what is generally taught in a conservative synagogue, which is how I grew up, is that there is no person who is the Messiah. The people knew the scriptures well enough to understand that they saw the founding of the state in 1948. They knew it was a messianic sign. Therefore, we were in the messianic age. We didn't need a Messiah. We just had the messianic age. So now the Orthodox communities, they understand that there is a Messiah coming, but that's not how I was raised. So I'm 17 years old. I'm ready to, do the ultimate fulfilling thing in my life, and I'm going to the messianic kingdom in Israel, and I just thought it would be perfect, And so like 3 days later, I was like flat. Because it was nothing like I thought it was going to be like. I realized this much later. Moms remember things that we don't remember. And it was maybe 3 or 5 years ago, my mother said to me, well, you don't remember what happened when you got back from Israel? And I'm like, no. And she said, we had a terrific fight. And you weren't going to go to college, and you weren't going to this, and you were mad, and you were screaming, and we were crying, and it was like 3 hours in the living room, and like, I don't remember it, but I understand it now in the context of what happened, because all the zeal that I had for God and what I was looking for in trying to find God, I had wrapped up in this package that I was going to live on a kibbutz, and socialism was perfect, and all the people there were going to be wonderful, and Jim Corsinides laughing, and he knows why, right? I had a boyfriend with, long, it was the 60s, right? Remember the 60s? Okay. Long hair. And people sitting in the street. I mean, people in Israel are brazen, just sitting in the street. Hey, you hippie, go get a job. I had a friend whose, skin was a little darker. I mean, he was Jewish. He was American. People yell racial epithets at him in the street. There's a lot of racial prejudice there. So clearly this is not the paradise I was looking for. So I came home after 8 months, having gotten into every kind of trouble that a 17-year-old person can get in the 60s. You got the picture, okay? I did go to college. And what's incredible and what to me is the strong hand of God in the midst of this is that I didn't give up looking for God. I still had that desire in my heart. So I went looking for God in all the wrong places. And and there's people like that now. We see people that they're just so hungry and they don't know where to go. And so I went to many places, but of course, as a Jew, church is not an option for me. You here are probably aware of the long and painful history, anti-Semitic history of the church. So probably the average Jew today would tell you that Hitler was a Christian. I mean, the world in Jewish mind is divided up into two people, Jews and Goyim. And Goyim go to church. and they're just considered to be Christians. And you know that he was never excommunicated. We have the Crusades. We have the Inquisition. And this weighs heavily on Jewish people's minds. We don't want to run off to a Messiah whose people are ready to raise up and kill us. You know, everywhere we're persecuted, we're kicked out, we're killed. I don't have any use for that. Thanks, but no thanks. So I did keep looking, and I wound up in a New Age movement because there's lots of spirits there. So I got very involved in ethnic dance, and it was my life. It was my God. I lived it. I breathed it. I ate it. I drank it. I probably smoked it. I slept it. It was all about art. And, you know, we traveled around, and the question was, is there life after art? Okay. So I opened a dance studio, and I was teaching dance, and I had a student, and she's 8 years younger than I am, but we were all a lot younger, and so she was really a kid. Her mom had forced her to drop out of school so she could help support the house, and I encouraged her to get her GED, and then we lived together for a while, and then we traveled around the country, which is how I wound up in Athens. You know, God said he's going to send the Jews to the ends of the earth. So after a while, you know, I would like to say that we split up, but I kicked her out. I said, you need to go get a life, you know. So she went and got a life, and then after a while we got back together, and she came to see me in Houston. Well, you know, we were dancers, and so we hung out with musicians, and so she wound up pregnant. And the father of that baby was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and there was just no chance for anything there. Not that we cared about that, you know, but she really wanted that baby, and all the girls were saying, look, you just need to just go have an abortion, and she didn't want to have an abortion. So we had met a couple while we were traveling, and the woman was a Christian. I mean, I know she talked about it. I don't remember her, like, trying to witness to us or evangelize us, but she talked about being Christian in her own experience. She's married to a Saudi Arabian, so I don't know what her walk was, but I knew that they wouldn't force her to have an abortion. I said, well, you can get on a plane and go up there, and they were ready actually to adopt that baby. But what happened was when she got up there, she lost the baby almost immediately. So she was laying on a hospital bed, you know, freaking out, and they led her to the Lord. Well, her mother's mother had actually been like a shaman on an Indian reservation. She had no religion at all. And so she wasn't prejudiced against anything. And so, do you want to receive the Lord? Yes, you know, tell me about it. And so she became a believer. She didn't tell me for like a year, but everybody else told me, you know, she'd become a Christian. I said, well, I guess I know now. And then finally she, you know, wrote me a letter, and I said, oh, that's good for you. All right, I'm so glad. You've been doing these bad things, and maybe you'll stop doing them now. So she was up there being a Christian, and God led her to her husband, and I was in Houston, laying on my bed, miserable, just miserable. God just was really gracious because he let me see that these people who were my friends were just like mirrors around me. And I just want to think about one person. And this girl was, she was beautiful, and she was bright, and she was articulate, and she had come from money. And we worked together. And her husband was a platform diver. And that's a job in the Gulf there when they go looking for oil. It's a career that usually lasts about 5 years. It's very, very dangerous. And she had lost her husband in a diving accident, and so she'd inherited even more money. We had another friend who was a rock and roll player, and so we would go out dancing, you know, at the clubs, and I just began to watch her. And like in the beginning of the evening, she was bright and articulate, and by the end of the evening, she was, you know, sloppy, drugging and carrying on. I thought, oh my God, that's me. I have to run away. So I ran away to Athens. And I found something, that wherever you go, there you are. So, I wanted to be a better person, but my total spiritual experience was with demonics. And I thought, well, I want to be better, and, Jesus, tie me down and make me be good. But see, Jesus doesn't do that. So I knew that they were praying for me, my friend up there and her new husband, that they were praying for me. And they began sending me these Hebrew Christian magazines, and I read them cover to cover, and I thought, oh, that's so stupid. And there was one particular, I don't know if you remember, there was a picture that somebody drew of a cross across a huge chasm, and the people were walking, and the people who were walking off the sides were falling. And I put it on my refrigerator. I thought it was so stupid. But see, God knows better because he's really smart. And what he said in Isaiah is that my word does not return to me void. And so God was so faithful to me. So I'm like, I'm thinking I'm having a midlife crisis. I'm crying. I stayed in relationship with my friend the whole time, and I knew they were praying for me, and I wanted to do better, and I'm crying on the phone, blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, your problem is that you've never given your life to Jesus. Okay, blah, 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 blah. So I got saved on the telephone. And I wake up the next morning. Oh, I'm a Christian now. I have to go to church. I had a ballet teacher. I knew she was a Christian. Where do I go to church? Oh, come to church with me. So I went to church. Well, the ballet teacher never came back. But I went, and I met one person there, and that was Michael Millier. And for those of you who know Michael, Michael's always had a heart for Jewish people, and he just really stuck with me and encouraged me, and we remain friends to this day. So, but I was just going to church, and, I wasn't discipled. What's discipleship? I don't know. I wasn't in fellowship. What's that? I don't know. It was a big church, and so I mostly just went and cried, and I thought, well, this is stupid, so I quit going to church. And then the car wreck started. So, I really praise God because I was never hurt. And my car was never seriously damaged, but I knew that God was trying to get my attention. And I was working for a bunch of reprobate lawyers, and I walked in and I said, God can kick me in the tachat once, and he can kick me in the tachat twice. I'm not going to be there when he breaks my legs. And I began to be afraid that God would kill me if I didn't get my act together. So it says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And that was the beginning of my wisdom. And sure enough, the ballet teacher called me a little bit after that, and she said, I know somebody's starting a little house church, and I think you would like that. And so I went to that house church. And those people took me in, I was there 4 or 5 nights a week. And they ate dinner with them. I've been lived with them for a little while. And they treated me in a kind of a way that I could see, what it meant to be a believer. And actually stayed there for 10 years until the fellowship kind of changed. But by that time, we were ready to move out. And I was ready to move out from there. Well, I was brought up in a Jewish household, and I understood that Jesus was the Jewish Messiah. I understood all the fulfillment of all the prophecies. But when you walk into church, it just doesn't look like that. And you know why. I was blessed because in that fellowship, that man taught a lot from the Old Testament. I mean, I went in knowing a lot. Nobody wants to play Bible trivia with me because the first row is Old Testament, and I'm the only person who can get out. Whatever I knew, he taught me twice as much again, and he looked at all of that stuff. And we had Passover every year, and I had 100 people for Passover every year. So I didn't really get it, and I didn't really get that I was missing anything. But God, let me see that. He let me meet Seth and Anna. We began to do this stuff and bring me around to different conferences, and met Denisha. We started praying for a Messianic congregation, and here we are. Just to talk about, the faithfulness of God and what he's done. There's a prayer which I believe is from Yeshua's time, from the 1st century. It's the first part of the Amidah, and And Jews have been praying it for maybe 2,000 years. It goes like this. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibur v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasidim Tovim v'Konei Hakol, v'Zocher Chastei Avot, U'Mevi Goel, Livnei V'nechem, L'ma'an Shmo Ba'ahava. Blessed are you, Yahweh, God and God of our fathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob, the mighty, great, and awesome God, God Most High, who repays the righteous with good deeds, who owns everything, who remembers the loving kindness of the fathers, and who is bringing a Redeemer to their children's children for his name's sake in love. I told you I had one great-grandfather who was an atheist, but on the other side, I had a great-grandfather, and also on my mother's side, I had a great-grandfather. And these men spent their days studying Torah and praying and teaching people Hebrew. And the study of the scriptures is just so highly esteemed that on that one side, my great-grandmother came to this country and she worked. And one by one, she brought the children and the husband. And she continued to work, and the husband didn't work that much. He studied the scriptures. That was his job. And this prayer was part of their prayers. And whether they understood it, in fact, I just talked to my mom about this recently, and she said, well, we don't believe that about them bringing a Redeemer. I said, doesn't matter whether you believe it. Generations have been praying this prayer. And I'm the recipient of that prayer because God brought the Redeemer to me. So I want you to be encouraged because your father and my father and Yeshua's father have set a spiritual plan in motion. And it's a plan that's only lately being revealed into the remnant of the earth. I know that you've lost friends and family and jobs because you've made this decision to keep these feasts and to keep Passover, to keep kosher. When I had this epiphany that we ought to be doing these things, I went back to that man who discipled me. And I said, oh, this is so exciting. We should do it. And he just said, but we don't have to do it, do we? And I know you've had that experience. The people who raise you up in the faith are going, are you saved? Right? They ask you that question. And your heart wants to break because not only do you know you're saved, but you're wondering about them, you know? In Jeremiah, it says, O Yahweh, my strength and my fortress, and my refuge in the day of affliction, the Goyim, the Gentiles, will come to thee from the ends of the earth and say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and things wherein there is no profit. So I particularly want to encourage you because we've been under a deception for 1,700 years at least. And now that that's being pulled away, I'm telling you that there's a bigger deception coming, that it will look like the elect are drawn away, that the elect, right, would fall away if that were possible. It's not possible for the elect to be drawn away, to fall away, but it is certainly possible that it will look like those people who think they are elect or who we think are elect. Those people are going to fall away. It's very treacherous times. So I want you to be encouraged in what you're doing and to understand that it is part of God's plan. And I want you to stay in your word. And I want you to stay close to the Father. I want you to stay close with each other, love each other, okay? And to walk by faith, not by sight.